Have you ever heard someone beg for their life right beneath your workplace? Have you ever stood at a crossroads, stay silent and survive, or speak up and lose everything? I had to choose, and the price I paid was everything. That night, I was working the late shift at Coldridge Penitentiary, a rundown correctional facility tucked deep in the northern mountains of Montana. Around 2 a.m., while patrolling hallway E, I heard a faint moaning, like someone being strangled, echoing up from the concrete floor. At first, I thought it was just sleep deprivation messing with my head, but then came the scream, sharp, shattering, bone-chilling. I dropped my flashlight. It wasn't coming from any of the cells. It was coming from behind a rusted steel door marked "Restricted, Level 5 Clearance." The door I, just a mid-level guard, was never supposed to go near. But I walked up to it, and I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder, then pounded, until finally the door creaked open just a crack. And I saw him, Grant Matthews, the warden, a man who had lost his son less than a month ago. He stood alone in a pitch-black room, his uniform soaked in blood, a pair of pliers in his hand, flesh still clinging to the metal. Sitting in the iron chair was Tobias Reed, an inmate once convicted of armed robbery. He looked barely conscious. His fingers were no longer whole. Grant turned to me. He didn't panic. He didn't yell. He just looked straight through me, cold as ice. "Well, you've seen it now," he said. "So, pick a side. You're with us, or you disappear." And me, Carter Nolan. I had exactly 3 seconds to decide, to live like a man, or stay silent like a monster's shadow. I used to think Grant Matthews was the strongest man I'd ever met. The kind of guy who showed up right when a riot broke out, eyes sharp, commands calm and firm. He never needed to yell, never needed to threaten, just one look. And you knew this man was in complete control. But the day Lucy died, that look shattered. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon. Coldridge had just wrapped up a riot control drill, and the place felt unusually still. Grant walked in with Lucy, his 10-year-old daughter, curly hair, a cat-shaped backpack, eyes lit up like she'd never seen a place filled with so much iron and steel before. We were all surprised. This wasn't a place for kids, but Grant smiled and said, "She just wants to see what her dad does every day." He took her on a little tour, only the safe areas, introduced her to a few of the guards he trusted. Then he got an emergency call from the higher-ups, so he told Lucy to wait in his office. "Just 10 minutes, he said. But not even 15 minutes later, an inmate named Marks ran into the surveillance room, face pale as a ghost. He'd just been assigned to clean hallway D, and he found a little girl lying motionless against the wall, head smashed, blood soaking through her white shirt, clothes disheveled, zipper undone. I will never forget the moment Grant came running. He scooped Lucy into his arms, rocking her, whispering the same words over and over. "Daddy's here, sweetheart. Daddy's here." He stayed in that hallway for over an hour. Lucy had already stopped breathing, but he kept whispering, kept holding her, as if time might turn around if he just held on 1 minute longer. From that day forward, Grant didn't take a single day off. No funeral, no time to cry. He came back the very next morning. No sleep, no food, eyes red and sunken. Every hour, he dragged inmates into the interrogation room. At first, he asked questions. Then he started threatening. Then screaming, banging on tables, punching walls. The man who once ran the whole system became a machine powered by one thing only, nameless rage. He promised shorter sentences to anyone who confessed, offered lawyers, deals, anything. But later that same day, I saw him smash a mirror with his bare hand in the staff bathroom. He slammed his forehead against the wall and screamed in the middle of the security office, "Why? Who would do that to my little girl?" I stood there, watching a father shatter into pieces, then start rebuilding himself into something else, something that wasn't human anymore. And from that moment on, I knew Coldridge was no longer a prison. It had become a battlefield for a man hunting justice, even if it meant spilling blood to find it. By the second week after Lucy's death, the atmosphere at Coldridge shifted from tense to terrifying. It felt like all of us, guards, nurses, even admin, were living on a sheet of thin ice. We all knew one wrong step, one misplaced word, and with just a single look from Grant, you'd be tossed from the system like trash. He started issuing orders like a wartime general. Any inmate who didn't answer honestly during interrogations, even if they hesitated for a second, was pulled from the line and thrown into isolation. Anyone who pushed back was labeled a security threat. But the worst part, he made us, the guards, tools of his madness. One Monday morning, during roll call at Block C, Grant gathered every inmate into the exercise yard. He climbed the speaker's platform, his voice hoarse and cracking as he declared, "Starting today, meals will be served every other day. None of you deserve full rations while my daughter's killer walks free among you." The yard went dead silent. Then came shouting, anger, metal trays thrown across the ground, and just like that, Grant pointed, "Anyone who yells is guilty. Arrest them all." I remember standing frozen as 3 inmates were dragged forward. Then came the order, "Teach them a lesson." Grant didn't say what exactly we were supposed to do. He didn't need to. We all understood. And when a few of my fellow guards stepped forward and began, I didn't move. I couldn't. Grant walked right up to me. His eyes were burning red like coals ready to ignite. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just said, low enough for only me to hear, "If you hesitate to strike the man who killed my daughter, then are you sure you're not one of them?" That sentence hit me like a punch to the chest. For the first time, I felt it. I wasn't just being asked to follow orders. I was being forced to choose accomplice or suspect. From that day forward, Grant began prowling the prison at night, alone, like a predator on the hunt. Some nights he'd enter the infirmary, demanding a list of all inmates with a history of sexual misconduct. Other nights, he'd sit motionless in the chapel, alone in the dark until dawn. Then came one quiet Friday afternoon. I watched him walk into the admin building, carrying a heavy metal box. He tapped it against his knee, keeping rhythm with some eerie, silent tune. I never found out what was inside. But after that day, Tobias Reed's name vanished from every rotation chart. And the last time I heard his voice, it came as a blood-curdling scream from the basement directly beneath my feet. There are things you just don't forget, no matter how hard you try. For me, it was the Tuesday night of week 4 after Lucy's death. My shift started like any other. Cell checks, logbooks, camera status reports, routine stuff. But around 1:40 a.m., while I was making coffee in the first floor break room, I heard a sound that made my spine freeze. Metal screeching across concrete. Then, something that sounded like bones snapping, followed by a scream. A real scream. Raw, strangled, layered in agony. There's no way it came from the cells. I was sure they were all locked tight. No, that sound was coming from the basement. The basement at Coldridge was an old maintenance sector, shut down since 2013 due to a gas leak. No one went down there. It was supposed to be sealed off, but somehow the sound made its way up. I hesitated for a few seconds, then grabbed my flashlight and security badge and headed for the old stairwell behind the mechanical room. The deeper I went, the thicker the air became. Damp, metallic, almost like blood and rust. The scream faded into whimpers, but it was still loud enough to guide me. Then I stopped, in front of a gray steel door. Its hinges were rusted over, but the lock, brand new, as if someone had replaced it yesterday. I leaned in, and in the silence, I heard a voice, low, deliberate. "Tobias, are you ready to admit it, or do I need to keep going?" A hiss, then a choking sob. I didn't think. I pounded on the door. A few seconds later, the handle turned slowly. The door cracked open, and there was Grant, shirt sleeves rolled up, spattered with blood, face blank. Behind him, Tobias was tied to a metal chair, 2 fingers missing, his chest covered in raw burn marks. On the table beside them was an entire kit: pliers, a blowtorch, box cutter, a jar of coarse salt, and a large metal bucket filled with something I couldn't quite recognize. Maybe fingers. Grant looked at me, not angry, not panicked, just calm, almost at peace. "Good," he said. "You've seen it. Now listen carefully. Either you help me, or you were never here." I couldn't speak. My heart was pounding in my ears. My lips were dry, my mind spiraling with 100 thoughts at once. But I had already stepped in, and there was no way back. I didn't know how long Tobias would last, but I knew this: if I walked away now, I wouldn't be me anymore. After leaving the basement that night, I didn't go home. I sat still in the break room, my hands still shaking. Coffee was spilling over the rim of my cup, and I didn't even notice. I don't know how long I sat there. All I remember is when I finally stood up. The sky outside had started to shift, that dull, silver-gray light of morning creeping in, but it didn't bring any hope with it. I had to report this. Tobias was dying in that basement. Grant had crossed every human line imaginable, and I was the only witness. But how? I logged into the internal personnel system and pulled up Tobias Reed's file. The prisoner currently being tortured. Nothing looked suspicious. Daemis, his most recent status update read, "In isolation for investigation." No one questioned it. I checked the security camera logs from the night before, specifically the corridor that led to the basement. The cameras were offline, disabled at 3 p.m. the previous day. Reason noted: routine maintenance per administrative request. Approved by Warden Grant Matthews. I dug deeper, checked my own shift records, and that's when I saw it. The system flagged me for being in an unauthorized zone. My keycard had been scanned at the basement door, a restricted area, with no valid duty assignment. In other words, if I came forward, I'd be the one questioned first. Why were you there? Who gave you clearance? Were you trespassing? Every piece of evidence I had could be turned against me, so I printed an anonymous report, a summary of unusual noises heard from the restricted zone during my shift. I dropped it into the internal complaint box, a system supposedly open to every staff member. The next morning, I checked the status, marked resolved, in just 42 minutes. Handled by Grant Matthews. I tried again. This time I submitted a report using Peterson's name. My coworker, someone with family ties to Grant, someone neutral, The request was denied. Missing verified signature. That's when I realized every official channel had been compromised. I wasn't just dealing with a man anymore. I was up against a system warped by grief and designed to protect his pain at all costs. And me, Carter Nolan, a gatekeeper once seen as nothing more than background noise, had officially become a threat in the eyes of the most powerful man in Coldridge. I used to believe that if everything fell apart, at least I'd still have my family. My wife, Amy, always said, "As long as you come home every night, I don't care what the world throws at us." And my son Caleb, just 7 years old, he once drew a picture of me in my guard uniform and called it my prison superhero. But everything changed. In just 1 week, it started small. A text from Amy. "I heard someone's watching you at the prison. What's going on?" I asked where she heard that. She replied simply, "Sarah told me." Sarah, Amy's older sister, a widow, raising her son alone. She'd recently started going to a support group at the local church, and in that group was a grieving father named Grant Matthews. According to Amy, Grant often shared stories during the sessions. He'd quote scripture, recite memories of little Lucy. He even read a verse that Amy's late brother, Sarah's husband, had always loved. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Innocent on the surface, except only our family knew that verse was carved into his gravestone. Grant was using our pain as a weapon to make us trust him, or worse, to distract from the fact that he was torturing a man in the basement. Around that same time, Caleb started coming home with a strange look on his face. One day, he asked, "Daddy, are you a bad guy?" Mason said Mr. Grant told him you're a sick guard and you hurt people. I froze. How does an 8-year-old even hear something like that? How does a man like Grant find a way to reach a grade school playground? I looked at Amy. She didn't confirm. She didn't deny. She just sat in silence, her eyes full of doubt, but for the first time, not full of trust. Things weren't much better at work. The same coworkers who once shook my hand each morning now walked past in silence. Peterson, the guy I thought was a friend, started calling me the paranoid one. And even Daniels, our senior night shift officer, pulled me aside and asked, "You sure your PTSD isn't flaring up again, Carter? You did serve in Afghanistan." I didn't blame them. I blamed Grant, because he knew exactly where my weak spots were. He didn't need evidence. He didn't need charges. All he had to do was plant a seed of doubt and let it spread like mold. That's when I realized the battlefield wasn't in the basement anymore. It was in my own home, at the dinner table, in my son's eyes, in the silent distance growing between me and my wife. An invisible chasm that widened more and more each day. After Grant planted doubt in my family, he didn't stop. Instead, he tightened his grip using something far more terrifying than torture: administrative power. I was no longer assigned to the safer zones. Instead, I got transferred to Wing G, the block reserved for the most dangerous inmates. A place that had seen 2 staff assaults in just 6 months. I wasn't paired with veteran guards anymore. Every shift, I was grouped with new recruits, people who didn't know the protocols, who couldn't back me up if things went sideways. One time, I even noticed something alarming on the shift roster. I'd been scheduled to work alone from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., a direct violation of prison safety policy. I brought it up to Daniels, the shift supervisor. He just shrugged. "I was surprised too," he said. "Came from upstairs. You should take it up with the warden." I didn't say anything, just nodded and understood. Every official channel had been cut off. I had no one left. No friends, no superiors, no family. I started losing sleep. Every night, I'd wake drenched in cold sweat. The sounds from the basement, those metallic screeches and muffled screams, I heard them in my head, even when they weren't real. Amy stopped sleeping in our bed. She took her pillow and moved to the couch, said I tossed and turned too much. Caleb stopped asking about my job. He just drew pictures of his mom, with an empty space beside her. Then one night, while I was stationed in the control room, a notification popped up on the internal system. Grant had created a new chat group titled Security Updates and Team Morale. At first, I thought it was just an admin bulletin, but within minutes, I realized something. The group didn't share any real updates. It had one purpose: to track who was reading and who was responding. Each message from Grant seemed harmless. Good morning. Please double-check all equipment. Let's pray for a peaceful day. But everyone in the group responded with emojis, with replies like, yes, sir. Anyone who didn't interact was noted. I decided not to reply to one message, just to see. 36 hours later, I got an email from HR inviting me to a workplace morale and engagement counseling session. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly how a prisoner feels, not chained with iron, but watched, judged, isolated by small, harmless-looking rules that suffocate you one breath at a time. And that's when it hit me. If I didn't act soon, I'd disappear from this system, and no one would even ask why. There's an unspoken rule in the military. When the whole system turns against you, find the man who once carried you off the battlefield. So I called Jackson Pierce, my old squad mate from our days in Kandahar, the guy who hauled me through a rain of bullets when shrapnel tore through my leg. These days, Jackson works for the State Correctional Oversight Committee, not a high-ranking position, but enough to launch an internal audit, if he had cause. I called him at 3 a.m. That hour only seems strange if you've never slept in a combat tent. I didn't sugarcoat anything. No dramatic buildup. I just told him what I'd seen, what I'd heard, and what I knew was happening beneath Coldridge. Jackson didn't interrupt, and when I finally finished, he asked just one question. Do you have any proof? Silence. Then I answered, just me. There was a long pause. I thought he'd end the call like all the others, with sympathy. That's rough, man, or I'll look into it. But he didn't. He sighed. I owe you a life. I'll open a review case. But listen, Carter, this isn't gonna be fast. I can't pull strings. I have to follow the process. Report writing, formal inspections, state-level sign-offs. Nothing's going to move overnight. I nodded. I wasn't hoping for a miracle. I just needed a crack in the wall, enough for a little light to get through. The very next day, I started building my case. I combed through the internal computer system, checked the access logs of every guard on shift, and I found it. Multiple staff members had filed reports about strange noises coming from the restricted area, all of them marked resolved by one person, Grant Matthews. I screenshotted every entry, every timestamp, every name, and saved them to a personal USB drive, completely off the prison's network. Then I quietly returned to the evidence locker, where Lucy's iPad had been stored since the day of the incident. It was still locked with a passcode. No one had cracked it, but something hit me. If Grant truly believed Tobias was the killer, why hadn't he tried to unlock the device himself? Then it clicked. Maybe he wasn't afraid of what he wouldn't find. He was afraid of what he might. I couldn't hack the iPad, but I recorded the serial number, the timestamp of the last access attempt, and the person who sealed it into evidence, Grant Matthews. I stopped thinking like a prison guard and started thinking like an investigator. Everything was too neat. The chosen inmate had a criminal past. The cameras just happened to be under maintenance. Every complaint landed on the right desk. Grant wasn't just lashing out in grief. He'd built a system to protect his vengeance, wrapped it in the illusion of justice, and disguised it with tragedy. And if I wanted to bring him down, I'd have to play his game. I thought I had it all figured out. Grant lost his daughter. He snapped. He blamed Tobias and spiraled into darkness. But then I found a piece that didn't fit. One evening during my shift, I accessed the entry log for Hallway D, the place where Lucy had been found the day she was attacked. Everything was time-stamped down to the minute. Keycard scans, motion-triggered camera pings, door access logs. I focused on one window, 2:20 p.m., the time frame between when Lucy left her father's office and was discovered unconscious. Tobias Reed's name never appeared in the entry records. His keycard wasn't scanned near Hallway D at that time, and according to the shift schedule, he'd already been placed in solitary confinement that morning for a rule violation. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but I double-checked with the official isolation report. Sure enough, Tobias had been locked down since 10:00 a.m., and the isolation order was signed by one person, Grant Matthews. So why? Why would Grant choose Tobias? I dug deeper. I pulled the list of inmates who had access to the area during that time frame, and buried near the bottom was a name that had never once appeared in any internal memo, interrogation report, or security review: Marcus Tillman. According to the system, Marcus was supposed to be on lockdown that day, which meant complete cell confinement, no movement, no access. But the logs told a different story. His keycard was used at the technical room door in Hallway D at exactly 2:09 p.m., right around the time Lucy went missing. And yet, Marcus was never questioned, never listed in any report, never brought up. I checked further, and that's when I saw the part that made my blood run cold. The person in charge of modifying the lockdown schedule that day was also Grant. The entire narrative, the accusations against Tobias, the torture, the threats, the staged camera malfunctions, all of it was built on a truth that Grant had created. Tobias wasn't just a victim of torture. He might have been completely innocent. And if Marcus was the last person to access the area where Lucy was found, then why didn't Grant lay a finger on him? I began to see it clearer than ever. Grant wasn't looking for his daughter's killer. He was looking for an outlet, someone to pour his rage into, to punish, to destroy. It didn't have to be the right man, just someone hated, someone easy to blame, someone who could disappear quietly. And if I wanted to flip the board, I had to bring Marcus into the light. The only question left was, how do you pull a ghost out of lockdown and drag him back into the real world? I knew I was running out of time. Tobias was slowly dying. Marcus had vanished from the records, and Grant still walked the prison halls as if he alone carried the weight of the truth. If I wanted to flip this board, I needed a strike powerful enough, not with fists, but with the one thing the system couldn't ignore: undeniable logic. I started with the one thing everyone forgot: Lucy's iPad. It was still in the evidence locker, locked, untouched. But I remembered something Grant once said to an IT staffer. Lucy always set her passwords based on little things, like the first day she took an art class. That's just the kind of kid she was. I pulled Lucy's school records. She enrolled in Coldridge Elementary's art class on September 8th, 21. I typed in 09082021. The screen lit up. In her photo album, the final entry was a video, exactly 12 minutes long, recorded on the same afternoon Lucy visited the prison. The footage was shaky, mostly blurry concrete and passing shadows, but at the 5-minute mark, there was a glimpse. A prisoner in uniform, back turned, inmate number 2275. I checked the database. 2275 was Marcus Tillman. His face wasn't clear, but the body type, the number, the timestamp, everything matched the window when Lucy disappeared. If her iPad captured that moment, it meant Lucy saw Marcus, filmed him, maybe because she was scared or suspicious. So why? Why had Grant never once mentioned this video? I already knew the answer, because it didn't fit the story he built. I sent the footage to Jackson, my friend on the oversight committee, labeled as unverified evidence, Coldridge case, March 14th. No name, no signature, just the truth. Then I moved to flush Marcus out. I filed a formal complaint under a fake name, alleging that an inmate had a personal connection to Lucy Matthews and had never been questioned. I knew Grant reviewed every complaint, and I knew he couldn't ignore that name. The next morning, the system flagged an update. Marcus Tillman had been moved from lockdown to medical supervision. That one move confirmed it. Grant knew Marcus was involved, but instead of questioning him, he relocated him to keep him under control. That meant only one thing. There was something more dangerous than torturing Tobias. The truth. I began putting the puzzle together, piece by piece. Hallway cameras disabled right on time. Marcus's lockdown schedule tampered with. Lucy's iPad ignored. Tobias punished, without evidence. Grant wasn't just trying to punish whoever might have hurt his daughter. He was doing everything he could to protect a story, one he believed so deeply he forgot it might be wrong. There was no turning back now. The next strike would be mine. No aliases, no shadows, just me. Stepping into the light, the day everything fell apart started like any other. I walked into my morning shift at Coldridge, face composed, uniform crisp, coffee in hand, just like every other guard. But tucked inside my chest pocket was a live stream micro camera, already connected to a backup account I'd created 3 years ago, back when I was still documenting training footage. Around 9:15 a.m., the Federal Oversight Committee arrived for a surprise inspection. Jackson had pulled it off, right on time. No warning, no cleanup, no chance for Grant to prepare. I met them at the security gate, smiled, offered to give them a routine tour. But instead of leading them through admin offices like usual, I said, if you want to understand how Coldridge really operates, you should start with the place no one's allowed to see. And I led them down the stairwell to the basement. One of the inspectors hesitated. This level isn't on the approved inspection map. I looked him in the eye and said, that's exactly why it needs to be seen. I scanned my badge. The live stream started rolling. My flashlight cut through the damp air, illuminating concrete walls thick with mold, sweat, and secrets that had never been scrubbed clean. At the end of the corridor, the final door, the one where I had seen Tobias tortured, was still locked, but this time, I had the code. I opened it. Inside, Tobias lay on a metal cot, tied down with leather straps, his hands bandaged, body trembling. No more blood, but still alive. One inspector stepped back in horror. Another called for a medical evac. I said nothing, just handed over a USB drive containing screenshots of disabled cameras, Lucy's iPad footage, Marcus's altered lockdown logs, and all the access reports Grant tried to bury. I didn't need to shout. The evidence would speak loud enough. Moments later, Grant Matthews appeared at the far end of the hallway, pressed uniform, subtle cologne, but his eyes panicked. He looked at me, then at the federal agents. He opened his mouth, but I spoke first. Warden Matthews, would you prefer to explain yourself? Or should I play the video Lucy recorded before she died? Silence. I walked closer, not to confront him, but to honor the truth. I lowered my voice. I know you loved your daughter, but what you did after wasn't about protecting her. It was about punishing everything you couldn't control. He froze, fingers clenched, eyes fractured, and in that moment, Grant was no longer the man in charge. He was just a father, broken by grief and consumed by it. The oversight team read him a formal emergency suspension order on the spot. They locked down the basement, sealed off the interrogation room, confiscated every piece of physical evidence. Tobias was rushed to the state medical center under full witness protection. I shut off the live stream. The view count showed over 4,800 live watchers, including reporters, former Coldridge staff, and my mother. I didn't feel like I'd won anything, but I knew this much. For once, the light had reached the darkest place. 2 months after the investigation, I left Coldridge, not because I was fired, but because staying would have meant living among shadows. My name spread across the local news. Some called me a brave whistleblower. Others mocked me as the guard who betrayed a grieving warden. I didn't care anymore. Amy, my wife, didn't say much. She just hugged me tight the night I came home after the final hearing. Caleb, my son, didn't ask about the prison. He simply placed a piece of paper on the table, a drawing, a man standing beside an open door with light pouring through it. I knew what it meant. My family wasn't fully healed. There were still silences, still uncertain looks. But unlike before, we were no longer silent together. Grant Matthews was permanently removed from his position, ordered into involuntary psychiatric treatment, and now awaits trial for unlawful detention and torture. No one came forward to defend him. Even the state officials who once praised him as a pillar of discipline quietly erased his name from every record. Tobias, after months of recovery, had his charges dropped and received a legal settlement for wrongful imprisonment. But he never spoke during the hearings. Last I heard, he moved to a small town in Oregon. No one knows exactly where. Maybe a man who's been tortured doesn't seek justice. Maybe he just wants to be forgotten. Marcus Tillman, the inmate caught on Lucy's video, was never charged. No confession, no usable evidence. And that's the part that haunts me the most. I exposed a torturer, but I couldn't bring a killer to light. Because in the end, Lucy, a 10-year-old girl, was still dead, and we still didn't know why. But what we did fix was the system. Coldridge was placed under federal oversight for 18 months. The entire basement wing was demolished. The administration was completely replaced. Every internal report is now routed through an external anonymous system. No more handled internally. Not ever again. I didn't return to corrections. I took a job at a hardware store outside of town, helping people install shelving, fix their doors, tune up lawnmowers. No one asked me about my past, and I don't offer it. But every now and then, someone asks, "Do you regret it? You know, stirring up all that chaos?" And I always say the same thing. I regret not doing it sooner.